Welcome to Liz McMullen Show. This is episode 6. As you know, the first episode that I recorded was an interview with Nell Stark in Trinity Town, where we shared our experiences with Superstorm Sandy. And this is one of 2 episodes where I am speaking with award-winning authors Ali Vali and JM Redmann about their experience with Katrina, and you'll also get an update as to where I'm at post-Superstorm Sandy. JM Redmann is the author of the Micky Knight Series, which is set in New Orleans. And Ali Vali is the author of the Casey Family Saga Series, also set in New Orleans, which is one of the reasons why I invited them on the show. Another reason is because they have been long-standing residents in New Orleans. And I wanted to see not only how Katrina affected them as people, but also how Katrina affected them as authors of series that are set in New Orleans. I'm really grateful that Ali and Jean were willing to come on the show and talk about a serious topic. A warm welcome to Ali Vali and JM Redmann. Thank you for coming on the show.
Hey Liz, and hey Ali.
Hello Jean, and hi Liz, how y'all doing today?
Doing mighty fine. So, I invited you to come on the show to talk about your experiences with Katrina, and other than the fact that you live there, both of you have written fairly involved series about New Orleans, and at some point I want to talk about how, as you've written books after Katrina, how it's come into things that you've written. So, when did you first come to New Orleans, Jean?
Oh boy, my father was a New Orleans native, so I grew up on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. I was born in Biloxi, Mississippi, and lived in Ocean Springs, Mississippi for most of my life. So oftentimes we'd come over here to visit, relatives and families, my grandmother and cousins, and all the cousins by the dozens, and all that sort of stuff. So it was part of my growing up that we would stay here and having a connection to this city. So. When my partner at the time wanted to go to law school, one of the places she got accepted was Tulane Law School. And I really hadn't intended to come back down here to leave, because at that point I was an expatriate Mississippian, and, that's the best kind of Mississippian to be.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just sort of life sometimes takes you in unexpected ways. And I ended up living here, and I really appreciate New Orleans. Some of it is I appreciate it because I used to live in New York City, and now I can afford a house, which I don't think I ever would have been able to do in New York City, and I afford a house that's in a historic neighborhood near the French Quarter. And so that's really cool. And so I've been here for a little over 20 years now. God, how did time go?
Wow, that's great. My family, I grew up in Hoboken, which is across the river from Manhattan, and my family had been in Hoboken since the early teens.
Mm-hmm.
My grandfather, his parents came over from Croatia, not together. Oddly enough, they never met there, even though they were from the same city, but they met in Hoboken, and they married and had 2 children. And we had been in Hoboken all the way through up until when we sold the house in July, which is just poor luck that we move in July and then we're displaced in October.
Yeah. Wow.
And my parents lost all of their wedding furniture. They had just finished the first floor, and all they had to put up was the decorative stone for the new fireplace, and everything was set. And then we put in the new rugs, and a week later Sandy hit.
Wow.
Oh man, that sucks.
Yeah. It really does. I think it speaks to one of the things, even though disasters are collective in that they hit a geographic area, and like New Orleans, they're also very individual. They're individual in how you are affected, and whether, was your house flooded, was it hit by the wind, the tornado, and all these things really play into the kind of experience that you have with it. Mm-hmm. And for someone who just, they just finished all their stuff. I had a friend of mine, and we were actually at her house the Friday before, and she lived near the lake, and she had just done a huge renovation. But she was one of the lucky ones. There's a tiny, tiny sliver right off Lake Pontchartrain that actually did not flood. Mm-hmm. And her house was just one of those that happened to be that. And interestingly enough, on the other hand of the lake, she had moved like a few months earlier from a house that did flood.
Ah.
Well, that's winning the lottery there.
Hello.
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, Ali, how long have you been in New Orleans?
Let's see, I've been here 45 years, either in the city or in the outskirts of the city. We got here from Cuba in 63. Actually, August 13th, 1960. No, not 63, 68. Mm-hmm. And my dad was a machinist, which was very good because at the time, no one spoke English. Mm-hmm. So he had a job that he didn't need to speak English, he just needed to speak math. Mm-hmm. And when we landed in Miami, they asked us where, they said, well, I think it was Catholic Charities was working the desk. And they asked him what he did and all. And they said the best jobs were in New Orleans, Homa, and Morgan City, which are, New Orleans, everybody knows. The other ones are two smaller cities. And so he said, well, which one was in the middle? So that's how we ended up. It's real scientific. So I went to college here, and so right after college, I actually moved to New Orleans. And what drove us kind of out of the city was Katrina. Carolyn, my partner, wanted to move a little outside, closer to our families, which, like I said, is for a little further south, which doesn't make any sense. But you do stuff to make people happy. Yes. So, no, but we're happy. I mean, it's, we were actually in the city last night. We went in for a movie, and we went so we enjoy it. It's kind of like a suburb of New Orleans. It only takes me like 45 minutes to get downtown. Mm-hmm. But, no, Katrina was for us. It was a real eye-opener because you just don't, I think Jean could testify that if you live in New Orleans for a long time, people, I guess the kind of line in the sand was Betsy. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was here and my house did not flood for Betsy. And then, so because it didn't flood in Betsy back in the 60s, it made sense not to evacuate.
The big hurricane in 64.
Yeah. And it was, Betsy, Camille, all those came ashore. And none of them did anything, but, we won't go into the big coastal, what's happening in the coastline of Louisiana. But back then, there was a lot more coastline than there is now. Mm-hmm. So a lot of those houses that didn't flood back then did flood. And we thought, we lived right outside of the city, and we had gotten a place that wasn't going to flood. And we left, and I guess the worst part was the not knowing. Mm-hmm. You're gone, and you just don't know. Yeah. And I know Jean lucked out because, George Bush might not like the French, but the French knew what they were doing. Because the French, the one place that didn't flood in New Orleans was the French Quarter. Mm.
Well, it's really what they call the sliver by the river. Mm-hmm. And because obviously, before there were the levees, the river flooded all the time. And of course, it put sediment on. So that the area, the old part of the town is an area that's higher. And I live in one of the, I actually live in Tremay. It's famous now since there's been a HBO series about it. And I live a block and a half out of the French Quarter. And the water came into my street. I say that literally that's where the water stopped, and it just about is, because it didn't make it into the French Quarter block and a half away. But my house is an old house. It's built up. It's got, it's on piers. So it's high enough that the water did not get up into the house. There are some cars, not one of mine, fortunately, on the street that got destroyed. But my house ended up okay just because, this is what the geography is. And also luck. It depends. Some of it was which flood walls broke. And right. I think, one of the things I really like to emphasize about Katrina is in New Orleans, it was not a natural disaster. It was an engineering failure.
Ah, yeah, I was reading about that in preparation for the episode because I knew there are natural geographic differences, obviously, between New Orleans and the Upper East Coast, New Jersey, New York, Connecticut. And as you were talking about seeing the river, my partner and I, similarly, and I think if you have this I think it's urban that you kind of have a tough, point of view on things. I was like, oh, this house has been here for 30 years, and nothing really happens, and I know they're telling us to leave, but we're gonna stay, and so we did, and in some ways it was oddly a blessing because we were able to take photographs of the damage. We took photographs of the water inside our home. We took pictures of our boat, U-boat that was our car. That was floating, because we had angled the car so it was closer to the house, and it was bobbing up and down. And, my partner and I were kind of crazy that we thought it was entertaining.
Well, what else can you do? Because you can't run out. It's not going to save. You can't run out and do anything. You just got to hunker down, and you might as well have a sense of humor out of it because it's all you got.
And the thing, my partner and I have been together right now 7.5 years, and what was interesting was how well we worked together. Like, I would think of something, she would think of something, and she was I was like, we saw the river in the middle of the street was when the ocean met the bay. Yeah. And it was like a river runs through it. And I was like, honey, we got to get all the food up, upstairs into our room. And she was there and kind of we had a little fridge that she was organizing. Babe, the water's coming. We have to go outside because she had gotten 3 cases of water. We got to go get it outside before we go. Yeah. And so I'm holding onto the door so it doesn't rip off a bit. And baby, come on, you have to get it into the house. And it was just, really entertaining. And one of the reasons, that made our confinement, which is after we had to stay and wait to leave, better, was something that you had said on Facebook before, Irene, regarding, fill up your tub with water, and if it's yellow, let it mellow. And so, it was very literal, but that stuck in my head. And as a result, we were there, the storm really hit on Monday. Yeah. And then the river runs through it, started to recede on Tuesday. And people were evacuating after that, but we have a husky, and they were not letting dogs go on the shuttles. Wow. And
so they changed that in New Orleans.
Exactly.
They learned the lesson in Katrina because people wouldn't leave their pets. And at some point, it's it's easier to let the dog or the cat go than to have people, not able to leave.
Yeah, my dad was of the mindset of leave some food for her and go. And in his head, because he wants to save his baby, me. Yeah. He's like, I'm willing to bury that dog. We got to get you out of there. Yeah. But for Ilya and I, we're the stupid owners that stayed here and kept her here and didn't evacuate her. And it's not her fault that we did that. Yeah. So we couldn't leave her. That's just wrong. And so, they were letting small breed dogs. And the thing is, two blocks down, what blocks is, only 2 houses on each block. This is like a beach community. And I was in the middle of the street, talking to this woman who was pregnant with her husband next to her, and she had an elderly mother who lives in the house, and they have different pets, like a large breed dog and cats, because they weren't letting cats on, they were letting small breed portable dogs onto it. And they're like, we can't leave our animals, and it's going to be too hard to try and get everything in, so we're going to hunker it down. And then they started clearing 35, which is like a mini highway by our home. And we're like, you know what? We're going to walk over that damn bridge. We may not get a ride, but, it's not her fault, and I don't want to stay here any longer. And so Ilya remembered that she had a dolly on wheels, which, was my genius a long time ago. I'm like, babe, if we're going to have that, it should be the one that has 4 wheels, and make it easier to move, the big furniture that we had to eventually throw out because it was infected with, bad water. And so we both, because our apartment was untouched, I filled up a big suitcase, she filled up a big suitcase, and one of the blessings is that I was able to go on my father's desk and take out all their essential documents, their wedding, marriage certificate, their license, not their licenses, but, their social security cards and passports, because I was concerned that somebody would come in and loot it and then steal their identity. Right. And my parents just sold the house in Hoboken and had $300,000 was their nest egg for retirement. And if somebody got their info and pulled that out, they'd be lost pretty much. Yeah. So that was the blessing I felt for us. And you know, I felt we were inconvenienced by having to stay there, and we were lucky that anything didn't happen, because we walked around and there must have been tornadoes, and we felt the wind. But, you know, some houses completely demolished and gone, like shredded. And one house had floated off its moorings into the middle of a street.
Yeah.
And then I found out about a house that not only got off its moorings, but, you know, flowed with the ocean down several blocks off to the right to land by the bay.
Oh yeah, it's incredible how destructive, particularly the water, can be. You know, I remember coming back finally after Katrina, and you know there were a lot of places that were destroyed, and then going with some friends into the lower Ninth Ward, where basically you had water breaking over one levee on one side, and then the water also coming up the Mississippi Gulf outlet, the other, so basically just rushing in from the Gulf and really being pushed in. And it was almost like some drunken god had come in and just played with these houses. Some of them were literally almost upside down. Cars were up in trees. The houses looked like they'd just gotten drunk and taken a walk down the neighborhood. They were halfway on, halfway off the foundations, or they were all the way across the street and you know, banged up against each other. And it was just such a magnitude of destruction. And it really brought home, you know, how destroyed that, you know, what that kind of water can do.
Yeah, I didn't realize how, like,
all that, there was a gigantic barge just sitting in the Ninth Ward. Just sitting there.
One of the it looks like one of the barges broke loose that was in the industrial canal and hit that particular levee and may have compromised it and caused it to breach. But there was also water coming in from, again, that two-direction water, and that's when it's really bad. I mean, it's always going to be bad, but this was just, I mean, there were also places that there were slabs and there was nothing there. You know, that house was gone, or it was across the street. So it was really, you know, particularly the places. And I hate to call it disaster tourism, because I don't think it was, since I lived there, but we wanted to witness some of the places. So some of my friends and I, we just, you know, got in our cars and were like, let's go to where the 17th Canal Street breached, the big, one of the big breaches up in the lake area. And then we went down to the lower Ninth Ward, and it was like, you know, we need to see what's happened to our city.
Yeah, we did that, and it's just, the one especially up around in Metairie, just, the thing that amazed me was right where the levee breached, there was a house right there, and the house is still standing, it didn't actually wash it away.
Yeah.
It's almost like, imagine your house, and then somebody comes along as a joke and fills it to the rafters with mud. And the mud stays, and then the storm, you know, because we couldn't get in there until about 2 or 3 weeks after the storm, then the stuff dries.
Yeah.
So they cut a swath right through the middle of the street. And then you looked at this house, and it was like, in the mud, which was now just a big cake, was toys and clothes and pieces, you could see like legs of furniture. And it's like their whole life was just encased in mud. And it was like, wow, that's just something else.
Yeah, with us, you know, one of the reasons why we were hit the hardest, because we're on an isthmus, so it's like 4 blocks from the ocean, 4 blocks from the bay. And originally, there was no town there, like, you know, way back. And then the sand just started gathering, and then eventually became a community. But we were hit the hardest because I guess we were, you know, the weakest link so far. So when the water came, you know, by and then receded, we were walking around, and there were sandbars, you know, a block from our house and like 5 blocks from the ocean. And when the flooding was happening, we actually had whitecaps come into our house.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it wasn't waves, but we were watching the whitecaps. And the thing is, like, we had barricaded our doors thinking the water was going to come through the doors. The water did not come through the doors. The water bubbled up from our crawl space. So we're rushing around getting things ready, and all of a sudden I hear the sound, blip, 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 blip. And we're like, what the hell is that? And then we saw a wet spot on the rug. And then eventually it rose to be about 18 inches inside the house. And we were sitting on the steps, and we're looking, and I'm like, you know, I having a joke with my partner, and I said, she's like, we should have some end of the world loving. And I said, I don't know about that, but if it gets to the fourth step, yes, we can have some loving. It didn't. Well, so I won the bet. Depends on who you're looking at as to win, but I thought it was funny, and we were going around, walking around and seeing all the destruction, and we're like, it's the zombie apocalypse without the zombies.
Yeah, I know. Just dead fish.
Yeah. Actually, there was live fish, though. One of my employees actually is a volunteer fireman, and he went into Uptown.
Yeah.
And Lon said he was on the boat, and they were helping people evacuate, because there was, like Gene said, there were people on their stoops, and they were just waiting for somebody to just throw me a sandwich or something, because I'm not leaving without my dog or my cat, whatever.
Yeah.
And he said it was amazing. He was like, he said, we were not that far from St. Charles Avenue, which is, a beautiful area here. And he said you could see fish floating. They're swimming through the neighborhood.
Well, yeah. Well, we had water 80% of the city.
Yeah.
That's a lot of water.
The next day, they were actually on outboard motors. There were people coming, originally with the water. There were Coast Guard and other folks on boats coming by and asking if people wanted to evacuate and take them. And, that there was enough water for a boat kind of blew both of, our minds. And there were Black Hawk helicopters, patrolling the beaches and looking around the area to make sure there's no looting. And there were tons of cops and stuff like that, keeping an eye on folks. And it was good because, Ellie and I were walking and we saw these two guys and they were kind of walking around, and like one of them had this huge pickup. And we're like, these assholes are going to go into people's houses and try to steal stuff. And the thing that's even more problematic is in a beach community, it was dead. Season's over. And the lights in our area, the few that there are, they just blink yellow because there's pretty much nobody there. So that's plenty ripe for them to be able to go in and steal stuff. So once we took pictures of this before and after the storm and the receding water happened on Monday night, then when we were leaving, I took my iPad because every device eventually lost energy. That's something that didn't occur to me. And so I took my iPad and I went from our bedroom that was brand new with a new flat screen and another flat screen with her gaming in the next room. And then I showed, my mom's jewelry and, my father's guitars and whatnot and, everything in a pristine state. So if somebody came up and stole stuff from us, I could say, look, this is a timed thing. You can see that these things existed and somebody stole from us.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing.
I think for us, everything was so full of mold. Nobody wanted it.
Oh, yeah, the first level, that's true. But there are many... Pretty much nobody has more than 2 levels. It's a beach community.
The water came in through the first level, and then the wind ripped the roof off in sheets. So that, just in case...
No,
we didn't have any water on the second floor. Here you go.
Exactly. So people were going for the second floor places, because all of what we did when the flooding happened is we went into our parents' bedroom, took out the flat screen and the wireless router and all the boxes, brand new stuff, for the DirecTV, so we wouldn't have to replace that kind of stuff. But one of the funny things about Sunday before the storm is my father and mother were getting involved in the church, and they had volunteered to do Sunday school. And my father was getting lonely for my mom, and so they tried to convince me to do it. And I was like, oh, God. I was like, I don't know if I can do this. And then, that Sunday I was supposed to do it, and I had all my little handouts and little stuff for them to color, and not a child was there, which is a good reason. You should not stay. When they tell you to leave, you take your kids and you go. But that was the last service in that church, because that church is on the other side of the parking lot for the beach. And somebody took photographs, and the entire building is gone. And it's so sad because unlike a lot of churches where they have prefab stuff, this looked like the inside of like a 19th century, boat. It was gorgeous wood and, amazing design and stained glass, and it's gone.
Yeah.
So we were there for the last service before, the storm hit.
Yeah. Oh, there's so many things that are lost, and they're irrevocably lost. I mean, everything from the photographs to, that building, some of the older buildings. Unlike you guys, I was not flooded, so I was okay. I did get looted, and I'm not sure whether to be insulted or not that they didn't take my computer or my stereo. They did get my really good scotch, and that was probably the worst thing that they got. I know. I can't complain about that. It's like, oh, yeah.
There actually was a commercial not too long ago.
The vodka, I took the tequila. Seriously, I did. I was at my house, and first of all, Katrina was the first hurricane I ever evacuated for.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like,
why did you decide to evacuate from Katrina? What told you I got to get out of Dodge?
Well, one of the things, I made this decision when I moved to New Orleans is, okay, it's a hurricane area, and any hurricane that's a Category 3 or higher that's headed directly for New Orleans, I need to get out. But particularly looking at Katrina and seeing how big it was, my sister who lives in Florida called me up, and her husband at the time was an air traffic controller, and she said, look, Harry's looking at it on the radar screen, he's taking the entire Gulf. At that point, I'd already made the decision, what would happen if I were here and everything's destroyed? I'm screwed. But I also made the decision, if I leave here, what would I miss? What are the things that I would really miss if it wasn't here tomorrow? And so I really kind of packed up my car, and crammed it full of stuff, everything from some of the paintings here to, of course, jump drives with all my books and stuff on it, a big hard drive with all that sort of stuff, some clothes, which was fortunate because, Katrina hit in August when it was hot, and by the time I got back here in November, it was not so hot. And so I was like, oh, I really like this. This is a really, cool lavender jean jacket. I would miss it if it, was its multi-crescent thing. So I just packed a whole bunch of stuff up and put it in my car and drove away, and hoping that I'd be back in 3 days. And of course, it was 2.5 months before we could get back in.
Yeah, for us, when we were packing, I was like, what we really needed was our winter clothes.
Yeah.
And because she and I are similarly sized, we kind of made decisions like, all right, I can wear some of your stuff, you can wear some of my stuff. And I packed, warm clothing and whatnot and other essentials. And I was like, oh, we're going to be back. It's not a problem, and we didn't get back for a while. But one of the, mentioning you experienced it during a hot time. One of the things that we were grateful for was that it was not hot, because about 5 blocks from my house, which is, let's say, one New York City block, was the sewage treatment plant. Which does not, oddly enough, did not smell.
Pleasant.
Exactly. That place did not smell. It's not like our neighborhood was tainted by it, but it was there. And the other thing, if you consider it, in a beach community, there's sand them are tar streets. And so there were about 20 sinkholes that were created. But the water that was coming into our home was tainted with sewage water, not just from the treatment plant, but it's a beach. Where do you think the sewage systems are? Where do you think the septic tanks are? They're not too far underneath, and that's what happened. And, when I saw it, I was like, Daddy, your furniture is gone. You're not going to be able to use it. And one of his friends, who had lots of antiques, said that he was able to rescue his stuff. And I was like, I'm trying to prepare them for reality. And I was like, yes, but they did that right away.
Yeah. And I think that was one of the differences between New Orleans is most people could not get back for at least a couple of weeks, if not months. There was no immediate, because I remember during Camille, a friend of mine, her house badly flooded, and they were able to pull the furniture out and basically stick it in a lot under the sunshine and just leave it in the sun for like 3 or 4 days. And they were able to resurrect it. But you can only do that if you immediately get it, and if you're not within near an oil facility or a sewage dump or whatever like that. But most of the time, it's gone. You just lose so much in these kind of disasters.
Our stuff was. I mean, you walked in and it was just the walls were to the ceiling. It was just mold.
Yeah,
and it was like mold you've never seen before.
Oh, I mean, dear goddess! I know because we took pictures before we left. Because the water receded that night, and then, we just had squishy, rug action. And we took pictures of the furniture. When we came back over a month or so later, the things that had grown on the wet stuff was just astounding. And we were there, and luckily, because my father put me in charge of the insurance stuff, because they were so brokenhearted. They just retired. My mom retired from teaching in June, and this was their entire thing. And my father, he's not unable-bodied, but, he used to be an athlete and has a lot of different injuries. And he was killing himself for like 5 or 6 months making this place. And he's like, I just can't, he wouldn't even look at the pictures. He's, I just can't deal with anything. And so he got me in charge of it, and I was bored when we were there after the storm. And the second we got there that Friday, I was calling FEMA, I was calling the insurance company, I was trying to recreate all the documents that were destroyed by the water. So when we got there the first day, actually weeks before, our adjusters had wanted to get in there and couldn't. But the day that we were there, they all came and took pictures, and, we were able to get all that stuff together and even get, support and whatnot. But still, one of the things that pissed off my dad, and I had to let him have his little scream fest, was when the adjuster came, he had to take pictures of all the serial numbers on all the big appliances. And when we take pictures before we left, there were, lot of bad water in the crisper and whatnot. And so I opened the door, and the smell was amazing. And my dad's like, I was never planning to open that ever. Like, what are we going to get? $2 from, coverage from the insurance company. It's like, I wasn't going to open that at all. And I had the guy, take the picture and close the door. And I'm like, you're going to thank me later when, we have a new refrigerator. And the whole first floor is destroyed. I opened the windows, opened the doors. About an hour later, everything was fine. But was he livid when I opened that door?
Yeah, try it after 2 months.
I know.
Yeah, no, that's when you just tape it and throw it away.
Because I thought, okay, well, let me see. I had the Vicks Vapor Rub under my nose. I had a mask. I had all this sort of stuff. It was like, let me just see what I can do. Of course, mine hadn't been in water. It had just been, a couple weeks or so without any electricity and stuff rotting. One of the lessons I've learned is never, if I ever go away from a hurricane, I'm going to put everything in the refrigerator in a garbage bag.
C does that now.
Yeah.
Lesson learned.
Yeah. Lesson learned. Yeah. And so I looked at it, and it was just not, and fortunately at the time I was renting, I have since bought the property. My landlord was like, oh, don't y'all worry. I'm going to be replacing that. So he got closed back very quickly. Yeah, and that was one of the things that I recognized in New Orleans was going to come back when I saw the refrigerator art. Because everyone in the city pretty much had to throw out the refrigerators, and so people started decorating them.
Oh, that's cool.
There was a Christmas tree refrigerator. There was one with the actual, the hat and the mitre of the Pope Katrina. I think one of ours that we had to take out one of the workplaces, we wrote, FEMA gets me wet. And just all this decorating on refrigerator art. It was like you had to, this is New Orleans, you have to decorate your refrigerator. You get the, Miss Lovey reached, 2005 with the tiara and the sash and everything. So you really had to decorate your refrigerator. And that was the first time that, when I initially came back, it was heartbreaking. I mean, there are places I almost didn't recognize the exit off the interstate because the trees and everything had been so destroyed.
I walked 2 blocks from my house, like minuscule blocks, and I started talking to that couple, and then I was like, where the fuck am I? Because, the entire street, because, the way that the streets run, there's this one big street that goes all the way to the ocean and back to the bay, and then there's another one a couple blocks away. But I think the reason why we weren't totaled is that there were 3 or 4 blocks that were parallel to the ocean that functioned as breakers. But I was like, where am I? And what is this? And trees, well, they're not a lot of trees down. That's not going to be a problem on the beach. They're all conifers. But downed lines and all sorts of crazy. I was like, where am I?
Yeah. I mean, the landscape just changes so much. Just, you don't realize how impermanent we actually are.
Mm-hmm. Sorry to pull the brakes on you, but that is the end of episode 6. I decided, rather than ending the episode at the 1-hour mark, that I would let it continue until it reached a more natural ending. So this is the end of episode 6. Part 2 of this discussion can be found on my website, which is thelizmcmullenshow.com. And it'll be there January 22nd, which is next Tuesday. Part 2 discusses what New Orleans is like in the present day. So tune in on Tuesday and hear more of the wonderful Ali Vali and JM Redmann.